That movie sucked.
I kind of liked it.
Movie Night Crew Network.
Hello and welcome to Content and Capable, a podcast all about following your passions while still feeling like a proper adult. My name's Sam and I'm your host. This week I spoke to Damien of the Low Brown Lowdown podcast, all about his journey at university, his experiences working in the media industry, and his research and further studies. Welcome to Content and Capable. It's lovely to have you, Damien.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here and to, I don't know, talk about stuff and being an adult.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird. Normally I am approaching people for guests and stuff and, you know, crossing my fingers, sent like 15 message requests and one person will get back to me and it's a success. But you approached me and I just read what you were saying and I'm like, this is so cool. Like, this is exactly the kind of people that I love having on. People who've got really cool stories that are really interesting to talk about.
Well, hopefully it's cool. And very much of the vein of, you know, I'm trying really hard to get used to talking about my research. So I've been really proactively looking for opportunities to be like, hey, this is what I'm doing and hoping people are interested.
So what is your research about?
So about a year ago, I commenced a PhD looking at Australian television production culture and how that intersects and affects and influences the inclusion of LGBTIQ plus characters on Aussie TV. And the kind of reason behind this was if there's been this kind of boom of queer characters on television in Australia, particularly on the ABC, like for obvious reasons, or maybe not. And there's a question about like, well, is this because society is changing? Is this because the industry is changing? Is it because the ABC gets more drama money now and it's just something they would have done if they had the money to do it? Like, yeah. And the answer is to be determined. But it's
it's definitely something very interesting. I've just finished up doing a couple of units at uni about Australian media. I was going to be doing a Australian media second major because I'm really fascinated by it. However, plans have changed just because of career progression things and uni and their insurance money. But it was so fascinating to sit down and go, why are these things changing and exactly how, you know, how have we gotten to this point where, you know, the ABC seems to have all the drama money and, you know, Channel 7 and Channel 9 are just buying shows?
All the drama money is a strong word. So there was a distinct shift that happened where, now I'm going to get the years wrong, but sort of around 2010-ish, you know, we had this advent of digital television, multi-channeling, the introduction of streaming services, and the quota system that we have in Australia was basically, you know, the commercials were getting more and more hours to fill and their quota of Australian content was getting harder and harder to sort of fill. And so there have been a lot of different approaches to sort of how this is managed. But one of the things that was done is that ABC ended up getting some more drama money. So traditionally ABC didn't make a huge amount of its own drama. And a lot of like the iconic Australian kind of drama from the 70s and the 80s was on commercial networks.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's sort of, there is this great moment of a shift of like, oh, this is what happens when we treat the ABC a bit more like the BBC and it has a bit more sort of fictional content coming out.
I'm a big proponent of treating the ABC more like the BBC. I look at the BBC and I go, that's where we want the ABC to be. Like, yes, it gets accused of being left-wing, right-wing, stupid,
I mean, every
smart,
public
whatever.
Every public broadcaster does.
Yeah, and but like it creates so much content for everyone that who cares in the end? And that's what I love about, you know, sitting here and going, why is the ABC, you know, making more interesting drama nowadays? And then the inclusion of LGBT voices as well, and their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I probably like the kind of interesting thing about Australian TV, and lots of people know this, and I'm probably telling people like a lot of people, something they know, but we have a very unique television industry and media industry more broadly. But in terms of television, we're influenced by the US and the UK. They started broadcasting television in the late 1920s, whereas we didn't start broadcasting television until 1956. We didn't start making our own television really until like the 1970s in terms of fictional content. And so we've been built out of, and all of our policies have been built out of this idea that we have two dominant markets in Australia from the UK and the US, and Australian content has to kind of forge a path of, like the legislation says, contribute to a sense of national identity. But then what the hell does that mean?
I remember reading it in class and I'm just like, that is the vaguest bullshit ever. Like, of course, yes, you know, get the idea, very 70s, really. But then also it's like, well, you know, how do you define and legislate that?
Well, and so it does include reference to Indigenous representation, and it includes reference to cultural diversity, but it's silent on gender, disability, and diverse sexuality and diverse gender representation. So,
and if anyone has watched any of the ABC's programming recently, it is a highlight on gender and disability and, you know, these voices that we haven't heard on TV very much. I'm thinking especially of things like You Can't Ask That and other bits and pieces like that you go, wow, this is where TV's going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think looking at that, it doesn't mean the commercials aren't doing it, but they're not doing it as much, and perhaps they're not. I don't like the term best practice because it suggests, you know, a whole bunch of things, but they're not doing it maybe in the ways that engage those communities in writers' rooms or consult with them in how they're developing these ideas. Or maybe they do, but if they do, they're not shouting it from the rooftops.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of the whole Bachelor, Bachelorette stuff where they started to try to put queer things and then did it, I think in some people's eyes, terribly wrong. I don't know. I couldn't make a judgment. I don't watch it.
I watched it. Yeah. I watched the Bisexual Bachelorette. And so this was my key takeaway, and maybe this is just where my head goes. But there was a bisexual bachelorette, there were some lesbian women, and there were bisexual women. There was not one openly bisexual man in that mix, which is insane to me. Like, and so what does that say about, if we're thinking contributing to a sense of national identity, what does that say about Australian national identity that either the men who were taking part in that show, if there was a bisexual man, which we don't know, didn't feel comfortable to disclose that, or that the producers were not like going, hey, we have a bisexual bachelorette, we could have a bisexual man come in as one of the potential suitors, to, like, you know, realities about drama, and to say, like, here's like another kind of angle to this discussion, and because there is a discussion to be had about not just bi-erasure and discrimination against bisexual people, but also if you look at bisexual men in fictional television in Australia, there are 4. Yeah. And one of those is kind of up for debate. There was one in 1972, one in 2004, 2010 and 2011, and then 2015, and that's it. Yeah. Lots of bisexual women not represented particularly well, like lots of bad stereotypes, lots of erasure, lots of like promiscuity, like, you know, promiscuity in the sense of, you know, they're dangerous in some way.
Yeah, that whole like idea of they're not to be trusted. Who knows when they're going to seduce you? Yeah,
but 4 men.
that like, you know, the amount of times that you turn around and you know, and you look on your television and it is, you know, a straight white man, or you know, and then you go and you look outside, you know, you go and sniff some grass and you go and see that's not how, you know, that the world works. And I do think I have an opinion on the whole like commercial things. I think I'm giving them too much credit, but I think that they're scared that it's not commercially viable, and so they're waiting for the ABC to prove that it's commercially viable before they jump on the bandwagon.
This is actually quite an interesting debate, because one of their big arguments against the quotas is that, well, the ABC makes this commercially viable content and that's not their place. They shouldn't be making content that competes with ours. And it's like, well, something has to come first. And, you know, a really good example from the UK. So Channel 4 is like a kind of quasi-publicly funded channel, and it sort of served a purpose for increasing diversity. And that was the channel that ended up commissioning Queer as Folk, the original British version, which was highly successful in very Russell T Davies kind of fashion. He did one season and then went, no, that's it. That's all I'm making. But he sold it to Canada and the US, and they did a co-production into something bigger. And there's opinions about which one's better. You know, there were no people of color and all of those issues, and all of the men went out clubbing every night as if that's what gay culture is. But like, so commercial, and it took a channel that had been created with a specific purpose, with some public funding, to kind of make that proof, and then it took off with a cable television network in the US and Canada. So like, it can happen. It doesn't happen here very often though.
No, I think that they're very scared, the commercial networks. I don't know, you look at the way that even just like in the news, the way that who gets to present the news and who's on air, and it's all very not conservative, but like, we don't want to rock the boat too much. We don't want to make such a change that, you know, Joe from down the road, who's got a Trump 2024 sign out already, he's going to be upset and, you know, go on a ranting tirade. But also, we've also got to be progressive, because we've really got to represent, you know, Australia. And, you know, how do they get that balance? And it's like, well, why don't we just ignore the guy with the Trump sign? Like, he should just go and live in America.
Well, there's and look, full disclosure, I teach media studies at a university. So like, there's debate to be had around the role of news and the way that they present information. But I think, and lots of people, I have lots of arguments about this, but my big issue is that people have a lack of digital information literacy. And it's because we're taught to sort of critique information based on really old ideas. And then you go into the world and you're just bombarded with so much information that you end up sort of having to, you know, kind of make a judgment of which issues am I going to chase down and actually find out what the truth behind the thing that's been sent to me is. And which ones do I just have to like leave by the wayside? And the problem is that people kind of, in leaving by the wayside and not chasing something down, don't go, well, that I can't repeat that opinion. I can't sort of engage with that debate because I actually haven't done the work. They go, well, I read that and I trust Beryl down the road, and therefore I guess that's an opinion. Like, and you just end up with people who everyone thinks they have to be an expert on everything. All the time. Like, I have these debates with my brothers all the time where I'm just like, you don't have to be like, you don't have to have an opinion on everything. You don't have to know everything. You just like, sometimes you just go, oh, look, I don't know much about it, so let's not talk about it, because.
And agreeing that, like, let's just not discuss it. Like, when we don't know enough, or, you know, even like I have same discussions with my brothers, and I go, I actually don't want to have this discussion anymore. It's, you know, too much.
It's going in circles.
They go, and it's like, why are you stopping this argument now? Just because you've gotten to the point where you've run out of arguments. I'm like, yeah, I want to stop, because this is the natural end. I don't have any more to say. So let's just agree that the argument has ended. This
is also a specific tactic that gets trained through those, you know, those YouTube spirals you go down. A lot of people who sort of purport to have expertise on something like YouTube use this tactic of deflection, where every time they have an arsenal of like different issues that kind of keep the debate going, because their goal is to debate. It's not to learn, it's to win. And that idea of, oh, you're just stopping because you've run out of arguments. It's like, well, why do you have so many arguments? Like, you're not seeing an argument through to its end, to its logical end, and reaching a conclusion. Yeah. You're raising a point, and when that point gets debunked, you're raising the next point just to keep things going, because the goal is to have more points than the person on the other side. And it's like, well, that's not discussion for the goal of learning. That's just having an argument for the sake of an argument.
Yeah. You mentioned that before, you know, you started this last year, and, you've been doing this research, which is really amazing. What were you doing beforehand?
I was a senior communication strategist and speechwriter. I worked in a heap of things. Like I did advertising, I did a lot of behavior change campaigns. And that was my goal. Like I finished high school and moved out of a little country town and moved to the city, and it took me a while to work out what I wanted to do. Just because, I always have to clarify this. I grew up not wealthy. I never missed a meal, but I realized when I moved out of home that everyone else's parents were paying their rent while they went to uni, and my internet connection's unstable, sorry. Everyone else's parents were paying their rent while they went to uni, and I was on my own. I don't know if this is still the thing. I finished school a long time ago, but you used to have to earn $18,000 to be declared independent from your parents before you could get any access to AusStudy or Centrelink.
I don't think it's the case anymore. It's now you're still considered dependent on your parents if you're under the age of 22, which is the stupidest age ever, because most people finish their degree by the age of 22. But you still can get your AusStudy and Centrelink stuff.
So I took a year out, and it was I'll earn my $18,000 or whatever it is in that year, and then I'll go to uni. And when I went to uni, it was the first time in my life I'd missed a meal and was oh my God, there's just, I don't have enough money to live. I can pay rent or I can eat. And it sort of made me realize the different position I was in compared to a lot of people around me. Because, I'd be at uni and everyone would be going out and oh no, I have to go to work because I've got to pay my bills. And so I dropped out of uni twice. I attempted 2 arts degrees and I ended up studying online through Griffith. So I still lived in Melbourne. I had a full-time job and I was studying at Griffith and doing comms only because I had a whole bunch of friends who had PR and journalism degrees and were working in interesting and rewarding careers. So that was the path I took. It took me a while. It took me about 4 years to do my degree, and I worked the whole time. But while I was working, I got into sort of admin roles, and then I ended up getting those quasi communications roles where I was I was the assistant in the communications team and getting some experience. And so I sort of really enjoyed that work. I really love writing and I find sort of the thing that I'm most good at in the world is making things happen, getting the right people in the room and that's a lot of what comms is, getting all the right decision makers into a place to say, this is how we're going to move forward and what we're going to message out. And that's what I'm really good at. And so I was made this really good career, worked in comms for about a decade, loved it. Somehow did a master's in writing in the middle of that. Not entirely sure how.
I was about to say, that sounds like a lot of work.
But it sort of reached this sort of fever pitch of, I was at a pretty senior level. The pandemic happened and it was insane. I worked for a government department and was doing pandemic comms, and it was really, really intense. And everyone around me was saying, oh, your next step is to become this level of manager or this type of director. And they're all sort of suggesting how I'm going to keep moving up in my career. And I just looked at it and went, I don't want to do that. I hate all of the, everything they're suggesting, all of the paths that were getting put in front of me as these great opportunities of where I had to go next. And I genuinely was having anxiety about this idea of still doing this work.
But that it's really interesting. You get to that point where it's just you're climbing the ladder. I'm doing the same thing at my job currently. I've been in the job for 3 months now. And they turned around to me and go, hey, do you want to step up to this next level? And I'm like, yeah, cool. It's a bit more interesting, a bit more different work. But I know that the next step up is just managerial stuff now. It's nothing interesting. I'm like, I don't want to step further up. I'm happy where I am. I'm happy to be a worker bee, because that stuff's more interesting than being a manager. Yeah, and it's an interesting thing because you can I find it especially in comms where it depends on where you are, but you can kind of just sit there and go, I actually just want to do this. I don't want to, be a manager. Or, I was speaking with a relative of mine last night, and she worked for News Corp as an accountant for a very long time and then moved on And she was talking about the fact that they had, continued to move up and up and up, but then it just became soulless. And she was like, I'm just moving on to something more interesting now, where she can go start at the bottom of the ladder again. Admittedly, she could afford to do that, but I don't know. It gets to a point where it just becomes boring.
Yeah, well, manager roles are interesting, and there's this thing that happens, like you'll have a really great technical person who's like great writer, great comms professional, great accountant, whatever, and the logical next step is management. And what often happens is no one ever trains them to be a manager. Like the best manager I ever had, her goal was to sort of, am I allowed to swear? Yeah.
Yes, go for it.
Her goal was to like protect us from all the bullshit so we could get on with our jobs. And so she spent an inordinate amount of time out talking to the people that were pushing work towards us and kind of, triaging it, making sure we weren't dealing with any shit. And you get to a certain level of seniority where the protection is taken away and you realize just how much of her job was just fielding shit and trying to like make it so we could focus on our work and not get distracted by all of the drama and the politics and the egos that would come in and try and control whatever we were doing. And comms is, I can only speak for my experience in it, but very fast paced. Like, a 16-hour day wasn't unusual if there was a deadline coming up. And often it was because someone forgot to tell us they needed a television ad and we suddenly had to do it in 2 weeks instead of 3 months. Like that stuff happened all the time. And the only way you could make it work was to have somebody sort of standing in the way of everyone trying to like, distract you from your job with their opinions.
I find it very fascinating. And I think it's so interesting because you're like, not to like put your career in a box, but like for me, my career will be more like on the ground, the deadline's in 30 minutes, and yours is more like strategic, kind of not long term, but like we've got to get this done, but it's not like the end of the world. Kind of like, obviously at the time it probably felt like the end of the world, but it like turns around and goes, that wasn't the worst.
Yeah, look, and the thing is, like, it's really fun in the moment for all the stress and everything. Like, it's very exciting. This is sometimes bandied around as a bit of a dirty word, but I was often referred to as a generalist. So I did a bit of everything, but my main role was really around strategy and then, getting all the pieces moving and then stepping in and working in the individual bits that needed extra support.
Yeah.
And there are lots of benefits to that kind of career, but there's also like lots of drawbacks, and my last 18 months in my role, I specifically took on a speechwriter role to sort of get a bit more writing because I wrote all the time, but I didn't always get all the kind of credit and kudos for my writing.
Yeah.
And so it was like a good opportunity to kind of go, right, well, this is now a title that I have that's going to serve me in the future. But I did spend that entire time just going, I want to do something else with my life.
Yeah. And so then you made the decision to go back to uni.
I did. And look, I had been teaching... I've been teaching since 2017, and again, comms is one of those industries where it's like, if you have a lot of industry experience, they want you to be a teacher because it's the type of teaching where they're like, they need people who actually know how the industry works, and the students are looking for that as well. Yeah. And I've always really enjoyed it, and I teach online specifically, and it has been a real kind of, I think about how online learning got me a degree that I would never have otherwise gotten. And I go, well, I want to contribute to that kind of world as well. And I want to help people who are like me and help them go to uni if that's what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And so I started going, well, I enjoy this. I enjoy teaching more than I enjoy my job. Like my job is rewarding in lots of ways, but I also sometimes get sick of it in a way that I don't get sick of teaching. And maybe it's because teaching's still new. But then to have any kind of long-term career beyond teaching as a sessional, you have to have a PhD. So that was like, okay, so I need to start thinking about what the hell am I going to do a PhD on?
Yeah.
And that sort of was the beginning. And I met my supervisors quite early in the process. I, before there was a pandemic, was intending to start sooner. And then the pandemic hit and I had to like focus on work and, you know, change my plans slightly so that I could save enough money to like be able to do this. And so I met them probably a year before I ended up starting. And it meant that like I had the insights of two very, very smart people who were experts in the field that I was looking at to sort of go, okay, I can think about this with their comments in mind over the next 12 months. And when I finally applied, I felt like I was in a really good position to hit the ground running.
Yeah. And it's those kind of things of making sure you're the right kind of prepared before you're stepping into that sort of thing, especially when you have stepped away from like being a student in academia for so long and you've got to step back in and go, well, how do I do this all again?
Yeah, and look, it's a different experience. PhDs are technically staff members, which I find hilarious.
I love it.
Like you're not. I mean, some of them have scholarships, but I don't. But you know, you're representing the university. You get a staff login. Although I already had one because I worked for the university. But they, the way you're treated, it's kind of like it's project management. You have a job. Your supervisors are kind of. Manager's the wrong word because they don't manage you, but it's kind of like when you're reporting to an exec and telling them this is what I've done and I want to get your thoughts on these things before I like take my next steps. But what I'll say is because most of the people I meet are doing a PhD. They do bachelor's, honors, PhD, and that's their path. I'm so happy I had like a good 10 years in industry running big projects because it's like more than anything, it's project management and kind of self-regulation and driving your own work and motivation, which is really hard to do.
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing where you sit there and I know my father's an engineer and he always complains. It's like, you can't have your head in the clouds. And it's that kind of thing where you go, oh, actually, I know where the real life application of this is. I know where this could be implemented, in real life instead of, for me, I've done 13 years of schooling, gone straight to a university degree. And if I continued along this path, it would be a master's and a PhD as well. That's not where I'm intending on going. But then I would have never have stepped into like an actual industry spot and then not had that knowledge of, well, this is actually how this would be applied. And this is where, real world stuff kind of plays into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's always that thing of when's the right time to make a big kind of life change or make a big decision like that. And when I finished my master's, I was like, I'd really like to do a PhD one day. And if I had stopped and done it at that point, I would have had a really bad time. Like just in terms of my my approach to how I worked, my knowledge of kind of how to manage big projects and how to like keep things on track and how to manage people who don't have a lot of time. Like, supervisors, can have up to 15 PhDs. They teach, like they could be a course director. They've got like all these conflicting priorities and they're probably arriving at your meeting going, I don't really know what I'm talking about yet, and I'll find out when I get there. And like that's what it's like working with high level execs, which I did for 10 years. You like walk into a room and you go, you're thinking about me for this 20 minutes and then you'll forget that I exist, and that's fine, but I just need to get the most out of like whatever I need from you in that time. And look, I teach comms, I teach third year comms. It's one of the things I try and instill in students, that you're going to deal with people who are going to be inadvertently rude to you because they just have no time. And it's really important to not take it personally, but also to work out how do you make the most of the time you have with somebody that you really need whatever they provide you, like authority, like a decision made, or, just their implicit approval of the approach you're taking so that you can make a bunch of stuff happen. But how do you make the most of that and not take it personally when they're like, which I've heard happen, someone say, you have 10 minutes and you've used 3 and I don't know why I'm here. Like that's something that can happen, and you try and get them ready for it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things you sit there and you go, you don't learn that in university. That's not something that you have to learn, but it's something that happens, regardless of, you and I in comms, but regardless of it's comms, engineering, science, development, or anything. You've got to sit there and you've got to go, I can't take this personally. It's not going to be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, comms as an industry, I haven't worked in many other industries, but you get thrust into that situation really early. If you work in a PR agency or a creative firm of some kind, you end up in the room with the head of the client's organization, speaking to your part of the presentation right as a junior, and they sort of put you in front of them. Same in-house, which I did, most of my work was in-house. My first job, I was, super junior, but I'd worked on something. So they brought me into the room to sort of talk through what I'd done and why. And, sometimes they'd be like, you'd then get, I've had the head of an organization say to me, I don't like your idea. And you're like, I'm a baby. Yeah. Be nice to me.
Please help. Please don't be mean. But, I've definitely had one of my, not many, but the mentors that I have at the moment, it's very much of that's not a good idea. If you give him a bad idea, he's going to let you know that it's a bad idea. And he's American, so he's very frank with it. And he goes, this is not going to work, and this is why. And I really appreciate that, because then it goes, can't take it personally. I've just got to understand that that's a bad idea and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and look, you don't always have to agree, but you get to be the person who drives the direction of the organization when you get to that level. Or, I've been a senior team member and I've been able to kind of shape the direction that something's going. But when you're a junior, you can only argue so far before you go, well, do you know what? It's not my circus. It's not my monkeys. I just have to deliver good work and be good to work with so that the next opportunity comes along.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's so fascinating because it's an aspect of working in the corporate world that doesn't get talked about very often. It's quite, it's unspoken. It's like unspoken rules, really. You mentioned before recording that you don't come from an academic family, and you also mentioned earlier that you come from the country. What was your family's reaction as you went to university? Obviously tried and didn't quite finish a degree, but then got to a degree and did a master's and is now doing a PhD.
So my dad's first in family. He also did his degree online, by distance education. They were through postal, he received packs of information, and he did an accounting degree. And he and his brothers and I think one of his sisters all did degrees, but went in various different directions. I'm the youngest of 9. I think you one of 10.
I'm the eldest of 10, so we're on the opposite ends, but that's okay.
But it's that thing, owning a small business in a country town that relies on agriculture as its main kind of client during several droughts, and having that many children and 19 grandchildren and all of that. My parents, I honestly don't know how they ever made it work, but they somehow did.
Yeah.
So the kind of shift to go to university, I lived in a really tiny country town. I didn't have a university within any kind of commuting distance to me. And so I had to sort of make a decision. If I wanted to go to uni, I had to move to the city. And I think 2 of my other siblings have completed degrees and I'm the third. And it was just a case of, okay, well, go off and do that. That's the support. We've provided the support we can. And if you want to make that decision, that's really great. And they support me. They got it when I dropped out a few times because they understood it was hard, but they couldn't pick up the slack for me. I had to make it work. And I always really try and qualify it that while I know I grew up quite poor, Like, I didn't know it until I was an adult.
Oh no, yeah, it's the same with me. I didn't realize how poor my parents were until I hear stories now of they drove the car twice a week, and once was to church and once was to get, groceries, and that was it, and I would like sit there and go, wow, I drove the car casually to a family friend, a relative's place yesterday to go for a swim in their pool, and that was, I just didn't think about it.
Yeah, and I mean that's a point of privilege to sort of go, well, while we were poor, I didn't know about it as a kid, like, because there are kids that absolutely know.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, I sort of it was the hardest thing just to talk to people that were my age who were from similar kind of country towns and had moved to the city, and then just say, oh yeah, because mum and dad cover rent, and I was like, how?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and it just meant that, like, I had to make it work in a way that worked for me, and there weren't any conversations, particularly, this is, I don't know, I left home like 15 years ago. Like, online learning was still kind of a new thing, and do you know what, that was the thing. Even though my dad did his degree by distance, my parents' response when I went through an online degree, they were like, oh, is it taken seriously? Like,
yeah.
And it is. It's a registered university in Australia. It's Griffith. It's got a pretty good reputation for arts and comms and things like that. And then I did my master's at Swinburne, also online, which was decidedly a more collaborative and better experience, just because it was I went from being in online tutorial groups of 50 people to groups of 12, and started to like be with the same people in the same classes and build relations. Like, in my master's, I made friends I still have today who once a month will all catch up for breakfast or something and talk about, hey, this is what we're working on. One of them's optioning a book to a publisher, the other one's off writing some amazing thing. I was the only one that didn't really go off didn't go off to write fiction. But that I never had that in my undergrad. All that friendship stuff just wasn't really an option. And I think they're better now. Like, the universities are getting it more and finding ways to facilitate those kinds of connections. But I don't know anyone.
Yeah, I think it always boils down to what faculty are running it. Like, I've had terrible faculty who are just doing it and just like pushing and go, there's this one terrible unit that all of us journalism students have to do. I'm not going to name the unit because I'm afraid the professor might be listening to this podcast. And we all hate it. People fail it. People don't get through. It's quite intense. There's a lot of assignments. But we turn around and go, there's no love in it. Like, this professor loves this topic, but he doesn't facilitate it to translate through to the students. Whereas I've got another professor who got dealt a real shit hand at the start of last year, where, a faculty member quit and he had to take it over in 2 weeks' time. And he turned that program into one of the most memorable experiences of my degree. And, there is a real knack that faculty have to make that. And obviously in a master's program, it's so much easier as well.
Yeah, well, it's more focused. That thing in an undergrad, all of the filler units that you do that you're just like, why am I doing this one? Like, what's the point of this? It's not what I'm interested in. But, they need to that I've recently learned that like degrees are required to have a certain percentage of assignments need to be group work to qualify for text work, which I did not know. Just terrible as a teacher. And I was like, why is this unit I teach have 3 group assignments? And they're like, oh, it's the text work requirement. But in a master's, you're just doing the stuff that you want because it's focused. It's usually I did a master's that was like by coursework with a minor thesis at the end where I wrote a novella. But it was really focused. It was all about, well, we're building your skills to reach this end point of a minor thesis in the form of a piece of fiction or writing. And everything felt relevant and interesting and fun. And I was working with people who were really into writing as well, which meant it was, I wasn't there with a bunch of people who are doing the elective from their business degree or their psych degree just to like fill the time.
Yeah.
It's a very different experience.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, and I think it's one of those things about higher research that you don't understand. Not that you don't understand, but it's like you can't really get an understanding for what it is until you sit down and actually do it and go, oh, okay, so this is what higher research looks like, and this is how it works.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is how it's going to work for me. Like, it's such a broad church that there are people who approach higher research in lots and lots of different ways and do really creative things. There's a real rise at the moment in the PhD by podcast. So they do an artifact and exegesis, and people engage with theory in the production of an artifact, a podcast, and then use that and reflect on that as like, this is how I'm contributing to knowledge through this practice. And every time I see those, I'm like, oh, that looks really interesting and fun. I did try and put a podcast into mine, but it was too much work. Like, I was like, I'm already doing too much. And a podcast.
It is a lot of work. And I find, I was about to say, speaking of podcasts, you co-host one and it's very fascinating. But it is a lot of work. Like, I sit here and I go, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this, plus, my volunteer radio gig, plus my paid job. Like, it's just ridiculous.
I've had a previous podcast where I had guests and like did, a run of 10 episodes and then just went, oh, like organizing guests is like more than half the work.
Yes. And it's like a consistent rolling panic attack as well. It's like, this week I was sitting here going, I don't have any guests for the next few weeks. I haven't organised anything. I've messaged a whole bunch of people. No one's gotten back to me. I've got people who have responded and gone, yeah, I'm keen, and then not continue to respond when I've tried to organise to sit down to do it. And I'm just like, you know what? I've just got to go and find more people. And, this afternoon I've got to sit down and send a whole bunch of unsolicited Instagram DMs and go, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? Because I don't have any spare, I have backups, but I don't have much of a backup. Like, I can't continue this podcast for the next year without actually seeking out new guests.
Yeah. My previous podcast, Camp Scary and Squee, which is because I love horror films, it was all about people sharing their favorite horror films, and we talked about sort of that mix of how horror has to have a bit of camp to it, like there's a bit of a spectrum.
Yeah.
Then the one that we ended up starting last year was with my friend Natasha, and Natasha was like a friend at work who, you just click with someone. I think it was the first Christmas party after I started there. We got really drunk on really bad wine and just realized that we had very similar senses of humor.
Yeah.
And when I finished up, we hadn't really hung out the way we used to have lunch together all the time, but because pandemic, working from home, I finished up work and we just weren't catching up the way we used to. We weren't, and that's that risk. You have really good friends in a job, and then you leave the job and you're like, we're going to be best friends forever, and then like it just kind of falls apart. And it was one of those friends I just really didn't want that to happen to, and we were sort of talking about how we should do a podcast, and so we just decided, hey, let's just do one as like a way of catching up, like a forced way of like going, well, we've put aside some time to talk about something that's going to make us laugh. So we came up with this podcast concept of the Lowbrow Lowdown, which is looking at how cultural moment manifests in pop, trash, and pulp fiction or culture. And our first season, we focused on pandemic prose. So we looked at literature coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's like all self-published. There's a lot of bad erotica where hot dogs go in places hot dogs shouldn't go. And it's really stupid and funny. But within that, we found some real gems. Like, there are some books that we read and we were both like, this is surprisingly good. Like, not just for being self-published, just as a book. It's like really good quality work, really interesting takes and sort of perspectives on this situation that we're in. It's a lot of racist shit as well. Like, we just sort of read some books and like, they were so lots of them were short, but sometimes you're like, oh, this book is 25 chapters long. Great. I'm going to read it in a week.
Yeah, it becomes like this, like, you know, and one of the pieces of advice I have for anyone who ever starts a podcast is never start it alone. I was warned against it by my friends when I did start it up, and they said you need to find someone to co-host with, and I ignored them, and it was not the worst mistake I've made, but I definitely regret not having a co-host and not having someone to sit down regularly with. Obviously, it would be a huge headache to then organise 3 people rather than 2 people's schedules.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is this going to work? You know, and I don't have a lot of spare time in general. So, you know, whenever I get a chance, I'm sitting down editing or recording or messaging for a podcast. But, you know, I just, you know, it's a lovely way to connect with people as well. You know, there's people I would have never have considered, you know, have become real good friends that I chat to regularly now. And, you know, it's really great to expose yourself to completely different viewpoints on stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, you know, experience is expertise, and getting to hear about other people's experience and seeing how that informs their life, their decisions, what they do helps. And, you know, it's a very journalism thing, but it helps to sort of show what experience does to people's view of the world. And that's always interesting and fun to explore. You know, and sometimes it's confronting and sad, but like that's part of the point, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all adding up to, you know, this amazing experiences and stuff, which, you know, you've definitely seemed to have had, you know, so many amazing experiences, you know, through, you know, every aspect that you've put your mind to. It's amazing to watch.
I hope so. Look, you know, it's that thing. I went to a kind of a panel discussion last week where they were talking about jobs in academia and you know, how just awful it is for anyone in the humanities. And someone, I had to sort of check myself and realize, hey, they're not saying this to me specifically, but they sort of asked, you know, they asked the room to sort of talk about what our plans were going forward. And I said, you know, the thing I really want to do is I want to teach, and I recognize that I need to publish and all of this stuff in order to do that. And this guy sort of responded and said, you know, you're going to have to work so much harder than the person next to you to like make it in this industry. And in my head, I was like, fuck you. Like I had to work so much harder to make it in the industry that I just spent a decade in. And, you know, had to like spend all my time building connections and networking, which I hate doing, to like meet people to, you know, get the job. My first proper comms job where I was actually doing comms work, I wasn't an assistant, came about because I volunteered for this queer business organization as a newsletter writer. And the vice president was mentored by someone who needed a comms advisor, who then like said, you should hire this guy. Like, and, you know, I put in an application, but I'm pretty sure because someone vouched for me is probably why I got the job, because that's how you get work. Like, you know, government's a bit different, but it was a organization. It was independent, and coming to like anything with a recommendation from someone they trust, who's like seen my work, was probably the way I got my foot in the door, and the rest of my career probably hinged on that opportunity.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's such a, sorry, I get ideas and I've got to write them down, otherwise my brain will just completely forget them. But it's such a really important thing, and I hate every second of the fact that to be able to get a job in journalism, I have to know the right people, to know where the job opening is going to be, to then have all my stuff prepared and ready to go to send off. So, and then for them to give me the good word as well. Now I've just become the short form news coordinator for a local radio station here in Brisbane, and it's great. Don't get paid for it. It's a volunteer position, but I agreed to having this job on the basis that I knew that it would take me to a position where I could leapfrog I didn't have to go through the shitty, opener jobs and leapfrog to exactly where I want to be, because I've had this experience and I have these connections, so people can go, yep, he's a good person because, this person knows him from when they worked at the radio station together and stuff, and it's, I hate that because it feels like nepotism to me. And I'm the kind of person who, if I'm not earning it, I don't deserve it. But I have to play that game, and it kind of makes me uncomfortable having to admit that.
But look, see, I don't read it as nepotism because you had to do the work and they're vouching for your ability and they're putting their reputation on the line. Nepotism, in my eyes, is when it's unearned and like that person is putting you forward because of who your parents are, or because you went to this particular school that's, elite. And like if I'm recommending someone for a role, which, people did for me and I do for people, I will only do it if I know your work and like I've seen your work and I've had some involvement with it. Like, if you're like some friend from down the road and we've never worked together, how can I recommend you and like put my reputation on the line of like, oh, I recommend really shit candidates. Great. Like that's, and look, when it comes to nepotism, I don't think they worry about that because
they don't really care.
Their position doesn't hinge on them being great at their job. Their position hinges on their connections.
Reminds me of like people like Tucker Carlson who kind of just fell upwards into where they are today.
Do you know what it is? It's that thing where every time, so this is a slight tangent, but every time you look at someone who's really successful in music or as an actor or director, and they like point out all of the things that helped them, like, their dad being the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or, their parents both being casting directors. And it's like that, they worked hard. Absolutely. Like clearly they're very good at whatever they're doing, but also they had an opportunity that no one else had. Like that's, it has to factor in.
And for people who have come from, lower middle class, backgrounds and had to work tooth and nail to get to the positions they are, and then turn around and go, fuck you, like fucking hell, like you got in just because your parents are this. I got in because I made 7 mistakes, getting to where I am, and took a detour for 5 years. For example, for myself, while my parents are in a much financially better position than they were when they had me 20 years ago, a little bit over that, but they still are like, nah, it's your life, you make your mistakes. And so while they're so passionate about helping me, they're never going to put money on the table, or, they're never going to get to the point where, we're going to just, take you back in because we need to, prop you up again. They're never going to do that. They're more than happy for me to ask, but I don't feel like I should do that because I'm sitting here going, no, I've been financially independent of them for, 3 years now. I don't need to worry on, mummy and daddy's money. I just need to, make the mistakes and push on my own. And then you look at, people whose rent is being paid for by their parents. And I go, okay, so what is, where are you going after this?
Yeah. Look, I don't begrudge them having their rent paid. Like, that's awesome.
No,
if my parents could have paid my rent, there's no way I would have said no. Like, particularly as a selfish 18-year-old. But it's that you have to kind of recognize, oh, that was something that helped me. Like, and there are lots of people who do recognize. Like, I have friends whose parents paid their rent, and they're like, how lucky am I? Like, that meant that I was able to do my degree and focus on it. And, I barely passed my undergrad, and that was because I was working full time. But like, it's fine if people recognize, hey, like, these were the things that helped me along. And there were probably things that were hard for them in all sorts of different formats. But it's the people who refuse to recognize that somebody else helped them along the way. And for all of my, struggles to succeed in life, lots of people helped me, like particularly people who, when I went into those volunteer roles or I built relationships through my work, there were people who vouched for me, who mentored me, who gave up their time to go, I'm going to help you. And usually it's because someone helped them.
Yeah.
And it's sort of just recognizing that no one succeeds alone. Success doesn't exist in a vacuum. And this idea that you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps is, you might have, but somebody else was also like helping you up as well. Yeah.
I think it's the whole, I was really lucky. I got sent to a private high school so from year 7 through to year 12, and I was really, really lucky, like was on partial scholarships and things like that. Didn't go to the greatest private high school, and it was just far enough out of the city. My parents lived quite far out of the city. It was just far enough out of the city that like it wasn't considered like a city private school. But you would then have these interactions with these private school kids, and you go, oh, I hate you with every fiber of my being, because, while, people are supporting you, you don't even acknowledge or thank that. Whereas the people who have had to work really hard, like writing doesn't come easily to me, so I've had to work really hard on my writing. But I then do not, let the fact that, the position I'm in is because of the fact that people really, really helped me and put the time and effort in. And I always will thank those people for their sacrifice. But, these people who now I see going, yeah, I'm just, spending a week in the Whitsundays. And I go, well, that's great. There's me here, busting my ass just to earn money and, make sure I'm making these connections. And you've just gone to the Whitsundays so that you can do whatever you want, but where you're going. You know that your job will be there, and you won't thank those people. And it makes me quite upset, because I'm like, these people have sacrificed everything for you, and you've done, you've just gone, no, I don't care anymore.
Yeah. Like the best thing that I think I can do is to kind of recognize it and pay it forward. And I do try really hard to do it. And, it's not always easy. Like mentoring someone takes time and energy, and managing people takes time and energy. Like these are things that are really good opportunities and really good things to do to kind of build that up. But they're also difficult to do because, like you, very busy. I've got lots of things on. And so making that commitment can then interrupt other things and slow other things down. But as much as someone can, whenever you have the time, if you recognize the things that have helped you get to where you are and find ways to pay that forward, then you're kind of, you're fulfilling a kind of social contract that those of us who don't come from lots of money and, all the connections, like that's kind of our way of helping and kind of contributing to the world we want to see.
Yeah, and, if only everyone did that, I think it would be very interesting. I think we would be everyone would be a lot more successful, but who knows? Well, thank you so much for your time today, Damien. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
That's been lovely.
And it's really nice to chat to someone who's, like, really interested in comms.
I don't feel like, it's like when I'm talking to my students, although I get more feedback from you, so that's good.
It's a one-on-one thing. I have to interact back with you. It's not like I can be an anonymous face in a tutorial. But yeah, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, I guess like the main place you'll find me is on Twitter, where I tweet at Damula, DAMOO_la. It's an old nickname from a former partner, which has just stuck. And that's probably where you get most of my hot takes about my study, which is mostly what I talk about. You can look us up on the Lowbrow Lowdown, which is our podcast, and we tweet at Lowbrow Lowdown as well. And check us out. We are about to move into unpacking the undead and looking at the zombie horror subgenre across history.
I am looking forward to it. I was listening to a couple episodes of the podcast over the past few days, and I really enjoy them.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Like a lot of fun. Lots of. What is this bullshit? Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any media that you want to plug?
Well, one of the books we read, which I've been trying to get everyone in the world to read, is called Corvid, so Corvid. It is set in the time of COVID, but it's a crime novella from the perspective of a crow, and it sounds bonkers, but it is genuinely the most beautiful thing we read last year.
Wow.
And you should absolutely check it out. It's like $3 on Amazon Kindle. Like, just get it.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. By Martin Cross. He lives in Glasgow, which I used to live there, and it's set where I used to live. So I'm like following all the streets going, I know where that is. But it was very lovely.
It's like, it's set in my neighborhood. I know that. I was speaking to a guy named Scotty McDonald a couple months ago, and he's Brisbane based, and he's just finished writing a book set in Brisbane. I'm yet to sit down to read it, but I know I'm going to be emotionally wrecked at the end of going, I know where that is. I know the significance of that. Like, oh, help. But yeah, that's pretty amazing. Well, you can find me on the internet at sam.the.journalist on Instagram and TikTok. On Twitter, I'm SamOBJournalist. I've been doing a lot more retweeting because I'm now running a news department. So my name is kind of attached to news stories. So I really, some of the news stories we produce are really interesting. We did some really, really great coverage on the City Point protests when this is going to air, a month ago. But it was quite amazing to see a community get behind. I'm going to plug. I've been plugging books, and I've been speaking to authors. So there's too many books. I'm going to plug the album Dear Wormwood by the Oh Hellos, which is like this folk collective band, and it is the most it's very vibey. I put it on. I was putting it on today while cleaning the house, and it's just like, this is nice. It just feels like a Sunday, and there's just like nice music in the background, and it's energetic but also like relaxed.
Brilliant. Folksy is exactly my vibe, so I will look them up.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I only found out about it because I was following the whole Dream SMP stuff, which is these teenagers who created this Minecraft thing, and it blew up like really huge. And we someone had did this animation thing to this one of the songs from the tracks, and then I was like, well, the rest of the album sounds pretty good, and I've just been listening to it on repeat for the last few months now.
It's exactly what I need. I got to spend my afternoon marking essays, so I'll put on some folksy music. And
I'm so glad I have not started uni yet. I love being in semesters. So Griffith is trimesters, so they've already started. I've got friends who are finishing up their summer semesters, and me who has been working for the last month trying to earn as much money before I have to reduce my hours back for uni. So
yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah, it's not fun. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really love chatting to you, and we'll definitely have to catch up again.
Sounds lovely.
Thank you for listening to Content and Capable. You can follow the podcast socials at Content, the letter N, Capable on Instagram and Twitter. You can send a super boring email to us through contentandcapablepod@gmail.com. The art was done by Opia. You can follow them on Opia_art on Instagram. Opia is spelled OPIA. Feel free to message them about making art for your project. Our music was written, recorded, and edited by Nora Strauss-Riggs. You can find Nora at Kane_I, that's I as in the body part, on Instagram and Twitter. Feel free to message her about making music for your project or editing your podcast. I'm proud to be a part of the Movie Night Crew network, which features the Restricted section, a chapter-by-chapter Harry Potter pod with lots of spoilers all the time, the Movie Night Crew, join some friends as they react to some terrible, some meh, and some really great movies. Fandoms Gone Wrong, a show that discusses all things fandoms. Of the Eldest Gods, a chapter-by-chapter Rick Riordan pod full of myths and legends. And My Cabbages, an Avatar podcast that follows the true hero of Avatar The Last Airbender, the Cabbage Cart Guy.
Coffee, tea, honor, Cabbage. Long ago, the four elements lived in harmony. Then, shit went totally cray when the Avatar attacked. Only the Cabbage Man, merchant of fine cruciferous vegetables, could stand against his trolling. But when the world needed some dank veg, he vanished. 10 years have passed, and my partner and I have started a new podcast.
My cabbages! An Avatar podcast.
A weekly show about Avatar: The Last Airbender. Whether it's Sokka's new line of cologne.
Hey, look at you, sitting there on a seal. Well, now look back at me. I'm on an even bigger seal. Now look away.
D&D related antics.
You have to make an acrobatics check for that, and Aang just like unzips his pants and whips out his d20s. He's just like, I got this.
Or randomly breaking into song.
Go bending waterfall.
We'll stumble our way through the greatest show ever made, one episode at a time.
You can reach us at CabbageCast, which is our Twitter, or
subscribe wherever you catch pod.
Rotten cabbages? What kind of slum do you think this is?
Content and Capable is a podcast all about answering the question, how do you adult? Don't forget to rate and review it on your favourite podcatcher, and I will see you next Monday for another episode.
That movie sucked. I kind of liked it.
Movie Night Crew Network.